to do is pledge allegiance, and after we do, I would ask that you stand after that and take a moment of silence to remember back this past year the wonderful people that have been part of Whitehall Township that are no longer with us. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'm sorry I didn't mention a more recent Ron Genicola, who has just passed away. I'm sorry about that. So with heavy heart, I will read this for the last time. Whitehall Township has an obligation to affirmatively further fair housing and to review all land use applications in accordance with federal civil rights statutes. This includes taking meaningful actions that overcome patterns of segregation and foster inclusive communities free from barriers that restrict access to opportunity based on protected characteristics. The township, in its land use decisions, does not discriminate against persons based on race, color, national origin, religion, sex, disability, or familial status, and reviews all land use applications in accordance with federal civil rights statutes. Public comments made on the basis of bias and stereotype concerning people within these protected classes will not be taken into consideration by the township in its deliberations.
And Mr. Armstrong, I just want to say, and I have heard it for the last time, and I thank you.
Okay. Okay, do I have a motion to approve last month's minutes?
I'll make that motion.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Do I have any questions from the board? Any questions from the floor? Mr. Secretary, will you please poll the board?
Commissioner Marks?
Yes.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Commissioner Dutt?
Yes.
Commissioner Swaniger, aye. Commissioner Ginder?
Yes.
And Commissioner Snyder?
Yes.
And President Armstrong.
Aye.
Approval, 7 ayes, 0 nays.
At this point in time, we are going to have a presentation by Christine, oh, there you are, right there in the front, about the historic district that we have been looking at and discussing. And if you would, just come on up and...
Is this working? Do I need to bring it closer?
I think we're going to have to move.
Yep.
Yeah, that looks like it's going to go right into your eyes.
It's not, because there's no cable to connect to it. So
Oh.
we're going to attempt
Oops.
to run it through the TVs.
Okay.
Tom said he could do the sketching if you
Wonderful. My name's Christine Essler, and I guess I'm supposed to give my address. My work address is 26 East 3rd Street, Bethlehem. And just a brief history while that's getting hooked up. I'm an architect in Bethlehem, and I've worked with historic buildings and have consulted to historic review boards in Bethlehem and Allentown and Easton and Reading and Norristown and Bath at various times. Actually done the consulting now for about 30 years. And I've been asked to help talk a little bit about what a historic district is, the different levels of historic districts, whether or not you would want to do one, whether or not you would want to regulate that historic district, and try to give you some information. It can be very confusing to understand all the different options. And just to give you some of that information tonight, the presentation I put together for a couple months ago now, right, for a community session. And so I don't know how many minutes you've allotted for me. but I won't necessarily go through every single slide in depth. What, 15, 10, 5?
And 30.
10 minutes, about 10 minutes then?
Maybe none.
Maybe not. Well, I could talk it through without any
He didn't leave a cable.
small detail. So while we're putting this together, so this really is being considered for the residential community that surrounded the Thomas Iron Works, and other people know the history of Thomas Iron Works much better than I do. And unfortunately, the company is gone. We have a company town, but we don't have the company anymore, unfortunately. So the area is unique in that it's has a lot of integrity in terms of its original form is still there. There may be some alterations to the homes, but it's in essence is still there. And some of the supporting buildings, churches, schools, and so on, corner grocery store, are still there. Part of what I do is I'm on the Pennsylvania State Preservation Board, and I have spoken briefly to some people at the State Preservation Office whether or not they thought this district might be eligible, and there is some thinking that it would be. So there is quite a process to put something on the National Register, and I should talk a little bit about what the National Register is. The National Register is a list of historic places and sites that have been determined to be important to commemorate by listing on the register. The interesting thing about the National Register is that there is no regulation attached to any building that's on the National Register. So that means that it could be torn down. That of course would remove it from the National Register, but it can be altered, it can be changed, there is no regulation on any building that's on the National Register unless you have a local ordinance to protect a particular area. So, I mean, that's one of the important things. Ah, it's coming.
Okay, everyone help me out. Where is the arrow? Because I
think it's up at the close right now, but.
Oh, there we go. Oh.
Wrong arrow. I got an A in that.
Take a little spare time you're gonna have on the computers. Remember that one? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's gonna do so much for you in a little future.
You're just up at PowerPoint, if you go up to post PowerPoint.
When he do something, you gotta open up and figure out what was wrong.
I
If
can't.
If you go up to the section of PowerPoint, okay, go right over. Up one.
That's a fatal error.
Two.
That's, if you hit the max.
Is there an 8-year-old?
Slide right down here.
When did they call it?
Over one more, that way. There it is. Over, one more. There.
All right.
Yay.
That's the only one.
All right.
Got a 10-year-old, Mr. Mayor. So much for multifocal content.
Thank you. So we can move to the next slide. So this is just a wonderful little historic image there on the left of Catasauqua. But Hackendakwa is the company town. You want to move to the next one? So I'm talking here, which I've started already, about historic districts, and examples of historic districts can be single structures, or they can be groups of structures, residential whole commercial districts, college campuses, large estates or farms, villages, and so on. You're looking at usually an area that is linked together by common characteristics. You can go on, I'll be sort of quick. And then I started to talk about multiple levels of historic district, talking about the national level with the National Register. In the National Register level does, it actually opens up properties for some funding opportunities or tax credits if it's a commercial property. It also triggers a number of other things, such as the 106 review, which I'm not sure that you necessarily need to know much about, but doesn't really matter if it's on the National Register. If a structure is historic, and let's say PennDOT wants to put a road through, they have to go through a 106 review if a historic structure is in the way. And if it's on the National Register, it will clearly be studied. If it's eligible for the register, it doesn't even have to be on it, it would also trigger that review. But the key thing here is that National Register status does not automatically imply that you're going to regulate those structures in any way. So you could put this area on the National Register and that could be all you ever do. It would commemorate it, it would be a history of it written, there would be a description of it, and it would all be recorded at the state and federal level. Bethlehem, first historic district in the state, 1961, has actually 6 historic districts, and 3 of them are regulated and 3 are not. So we have actually 3 areas in Bethlehem that are on the National Register but are not regulated. Usually, the north side was the first to be regulated in 1961, the south side in 2000, and Mount Airy, which was put on the National Register in 1986. The community there decided they wanted to be regulated, and so the city did include that into their historic ordinance. Yeah.
If I was a homeowner in this district, and I'm on the register, it's not regulated, and I wanted to do an entire facelift of my house and completely change the characterization of the house, how it looks, everything about it, would that still then, or would that take it out of that?
There's a certain amount of change that can occur in a district before it becomes simply no longer having the same characteristics that it got listed for.
What would be that percentage?
You know, we were just on the board at the state level, we just delisted part of the Frankfurt Arsenal in Philadelphia because about 50% of it had been demolished. So they delisted part of it, they kept the rest on. So that was where there was complete demolition. So it's a little hard for me to define what that tipping point is, but when you're not regulating a district, you know, there's a certain level that can happen, and it really doesn't really affect the listing.
Thank you.
Next slide. I went briefly through how a district is put in place. It has to go through actually the process of a narrative being written, a lot of photographs of the buildings, description of the buildings. This all goes to the state, gets reviewed by the state's historic preservation staff. It ultimately goes to the preservation board, which I'm on. They review it and approve it. Then it goes to the National Park Service. The National Park Service then does a review and usually accepts what the state recommends, and it then ultimately gets listed. So that's on the state level. Let's move to the next slide. The local level, this is where the community and all of you would have to make a decision. If you wanted to regulate the district in any way, you would need to create a local ordinance, and that local ordinance would define the level of protection or oversight that you wanted to have. It could be as minimal as you want to review situations where somebody wants to demolish a building. That might be all that you ever look at. And that would give you an opportunity to work with that person to say, are you really sure that you need to demolish it? Are there other things you can do? And if there has to be a review board in place, a HARB, Historic and Architectural Review Board, or a historic commission, essentially the same thing. They would actually vote positive or negative to approve what they call a certificate of appropriateness for that demolition. If the property owner disagreed with that, they would, the sort of opportunity to question that comes actually to council. And that's where that could be overridden or it could be upheld. So there is levels where they can appeal through that.
Would a seller who lives in the district be required to tell a buyer that they are in a historic district? Would that be something they would have to inform the buyer?
As I understand it, the sales agreements, the real estate level, there is a disclosure if you're in a historic district. And especially if it's a regulated one, I think that's something that is, I don't know if it's required, but generally those sales agreements have that on there.
Non-regulated, would they still have to?
Yeah, I don't think it's as important because what they can do with a home is not regulated. So that's the process on the local level. Do you want to go to the next slide? So this is where we get into the history. I don't think I need to go over that with most of you. Probably know the history better than I do. So let's see the next slide. And this is just taking you step by step through that process I mentioned quickly on listing on the National Register. This is just supplemented with photos of the homes. I find them very interesting because they're actually very simple, but very consistent. And they're twins. In this case, the gable faces forward. Sometimes they are to the side. But they're very nicely designed, simple homes. Next. These are some reasons you might want to have a National Register district, and just as an educational opportunity. Some of these points maybe don't make a whole lot of sense, but saving buildings is actually a very green thing because you're not demolishing and putting into a landfill all the energy and all of the resources that went in to build that building in the first place. Energy efficiency is something you think, I don't know, old homes are not very efficient, but if you piggyback that on the idea of if you demolish a building and put up a new building, it takes something like 50 years to actually break even with the amount of energy that you save with the new building versus keeping the old one if you actually analyze it. If you have a regulated district, it can improve property values. It doesn't always. Some areas see a dramatic change because everybody who lives there knows that everybody else will have to do things according to what the regulations are. And when you do have a local district, usually design guidelines need to be developed so people do know ahead of time what is generally acceptable. Potential tourism, these are a little stretched. They really work well in certain areas. That might be a little far here. But I think, one of the great things is, to me, is just educational in its history, and it's a celebration of what was here. And it creates a community. Next. And so these are, as I said, if you do regulate, what kind of rules, as I said, you can go from soup to nuts. You could be at the level of simply demolition. You could regulate as much as the north side of Bethlehem, which is on the other extreme. That's paint colors, it's shutters, it's windows, it's doorknobs, just about. It's just about everything. So that's a choice that you as a community and as commissioners would make if you decided to regulate at any level. You could decide what and how much you wanted to regulate. That's not set in stone. Okay? And that's kind of repetitive, just sort of talking about that. The other thing is if you do regulate, it doesn't require anyone to make any change on the home that they have. There's no impetus to force anyone to make a change. And it also, by state statute, if you have, let's say you have vinyl windows and you want to replace your windows, you can replace in kind with what was there. So in other words, if there's vinyl windows, you can replace the vinyl windows. If you have wood windows, if you did regulate that, the review board might say, no, we want you to stay with wood. So I mean, that's a level you may not want to get into. But typically the state statutes that support this basically say whatever you have there, you can keep there. You don't have to change. Okay? This is just a little fun. Is preservation a money pit? Certainly can be. Doesn't have to be. Someone who owns an old home, I know that it can be. Next one is, are there grants available for historic preservation? There are not a lot. If you are a National Register Historic District and you have a commercial income-producing property, you are, if the tax bill actually keeps it, you would be eligible for a 20% tax credit on the investment that you make to renovate a building. I don't know, that's right now up in the air whether that's going to continue going forward. The Senate has it in their bill and the House does not. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with that incentive. That incentive has been very important to cities across the country, very important in revitalizing some urban core areas. Easton right now is restoring and renovating the Simone Silk Mill, and that is a historic tax credit project, and that was critical to making that project work. So it does, there are some good things if they survive the tax overhaul. State has the same, they have tax credits that are available, again, commercially, only commercial. So if you have a income producing, it can be residential in that it's apartments, but it can't be a single family home. Some areas have small grants, like Allentown has some facade money, or did, but that would be totally dependent on the township, whether you ever put together any kind of grants available to homeowners. The county had a wonderful program quite a few years ago that Bath took very good advantage of, and that was facade. Northampton County. You're in Lehigh. Ah, that's right. Sorry.
That'll change.
So it's a great program. That was a wonderful program. It was small grants that went to single property owners, residential, that really helped certain streets in Bath to upgrade their homes. A few on Chestnut Street and some on Main, some great renovation has occurred. So not a whole lot of great news on where the money might come from, but the National Register status can help. And if the county ever would do something, it would be great. So that's a quick overview. Quick overview, and if you have any questions, please let me know.
Thank you very much.
Okay,
Appreciate it.
you're welcome.
Thank you, Chris.
Okay, courtesy of the floor, Mr. Secretary.
Alice Brenna. Come up to the podium, your name and address, and all the other good things you have to say. Over there.
I didn't know I was going to have to do this. My name is Alice Brenna, R-E-N-N-A. I live at 3038 South Bridge Street in Whitehall, Pennsylvania. And I read this thoroughly. When it came time to pick up the leaves, I referred to this book. And it says here, leaf collection, December 4th, which was Monday. I put my leaves out in the container that they requested, and Wednesday it was still sitting there. So I went down to the township and asked them, well, when is our pickup? And the lady informed me when she looked at this, she said, that's Fullerton. And I said, I don't really care about Fullerton to pick up. When is Whitehall? And she says, oh, you missed it. That was in November. I said, the leaves hadn't fallen off the trees in November. So then she said, oh, I'm sorry, there's nothing more we can do. She says, I suggest you take it over to that landfill thing we have. I said, the thing is a huge container. I can't lift it. And I said, besides, it won't fit in my car. So she said, unload it, put it in bags, take it over, empty the bags, bring them home. And then she said, or what you can do is leave it in the container, and then next year put it out when you're supposed to put it out. I said, oh, great. And I left. So that was my thing, and I emptied the container, I put it in bags, and the garbage men today took them away. But anyway, reason I'm here, I don't want to see that next year. And the people were extremely rude, and I've dealt with the public before, and that was...
Let me address your concern.
Right, pardon?
Let me address your concern.
Right, okay,
The newsletter is prepared about 4 months prior.
okay.
December 4th, your leaf pickup in Hockendackwa is not on Monday. Leaf pickup is on Tuesday.
All right, yeah, mine was out there. Mine was
So
on
that
there.
would have been December 5th.
Yeah, right, which I was happy with that.
Okay,
They didn't come to pick it up at all.
so,
And I had like
And
6
Fullerton-
neighbors that did the same thing.
and Fullerton is part of Whitehall Township,
Right,
okay?
right,
So on Tuesday is Hockendackwa pickup.
okay,
On Wednesday is Egypt and Cementon pickup. On Thursday is West Caddy pickup. On Friday is Fullerton West. And then on Monday is Fullerton South. Next year we are looking to delay all the pickups until the first week of April. So no one will have yard waste or cut green grass picked up in March,
okay,
to accommodate all of you that have late flash frozen leaves on your trees. All right?
okay.
Now,
I wouldn't have cared if they said he weren't gonna pick it up at all.
but
But
we
it-
apologize that many people in Hockendackwa read December 4th when their pickup is leaf pickup and cut green grass pickup is the day after. It is not considered yard waste. Yard waste is the day of your refuse and recycling pickup.
I left it out there for 3 days.
I know.
had a choice.
So we also opened the Cameron track, which was closed for the season last Saturday, and we had about 40 people come in the snow.
I would imagine with the leaves, because all
They
my
did.
neighbors were very upset.
And it will also be reopened this week, this Saturday. It's also open daily by appointment.
Yes, I knew
Okay.
that.
And not to make excuses, but no other municipality in the Lehigh Valley picks up your yard waste, your cut green grass, your leaves, 9 months a year at the curbside pickup.
Yes, they do.
Which one?
I live in Northampton. They pick up everything.
But where do they take
Year
it?
round. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't care.
Well, we do. We do, ma'am. We do. They have to go
To recycle.
organic, they have to be organically recycled. They cannot go to a landfill,
Okay.
all right? So that material in
But
Northampton,
how can they be organically
Excuse me,
recycled?
yeah,
Please.
I'm sorry.
and
Okay.
so we apologize for this. Of course, Mother Nature provided us with, as Channel 6 said, a 2-inch snow event on Saturday.
6.
All right, so right now, if the snow does melt, we do have the opening at Cameron all this week and Saturday.
I don't need it now.
I know, you threw it in your 95-gallon garbage container,
Which I
and
also complained about.
it's
I
now,
had this monstrous thing that I could put 10 people in.
and now it's in a landfill out in Kempton,
Right,
okay?
okay.
All right, so we apologize for the confusion caused by the
I look
Monday
at
date.
this whenever I need.
I'm glad you did. I'm
I
glad you did.
take it for granted they
Okay.
knew what they were doing.
You need to come to the podium, and
Okay, go ahead.
is it for residents only?
Yeah.
I'm her daughter.
Okay.
That's why. I just want to know.
No, you still have to come to the podium.
Serves you right.
Oh, dear.
Uh-oh.
It gets recorded, that's,
Yes.
Yes.
Carol Renner, her daughter, and I just don't, what was the confusion was, it was supposed to have been picked up on December 4th, which was a Monday, but it was not even on December 5th, which was the Tuesday.
Mhm.
It was never picked up.
No, it's because there wasn't a truck to come pick it up.
But,
We have 4 trucks, separate trucks in Whitehall. The first is the maroon cart. The second is the green cart. The third is the yard waste cart on Monday in Hockandaqua. On Tuesday is the next truck for leaves or cut green grass. 4 trucks in Whitehall.
okay, but why didn't it?
The collection in Hockandaqua, the last day was the last Tuesday in November for leaves.
So
The
that
week
was
before.
even more of a
The week
typo.
before, yes.
Okay, so.
No, it's not a typo. I mentioned it's the day after.
Can I see that? Because it says specifically,
And December 4th is Fullerton.
it doesn't say Fullerton.
Well, that's why we even have to spell out when it's a holiday.
Yes.
Monday to Tuesday, Tuesday to Wednesday,
Absolutely.
because
Yeah, and I saw that.
people call and say, how dare you celebrate Memorial Day?
That's-
How dare you celebrate Labor Day? Honest to God, those are the calls that our people
Oh, I
get.
believe you.
And why wasn't my garbage picked up on July 4th?
Right. But it says December 4th, 2017, leaves will be collected the day after your normal trash recycling collection day.
And in Hockandaqua, that was the Tuesday.
Probably, thanks to what happened here, we can be a little clearer next year
That's
in
what
the
we're
newsletter.
asking for,
That's,
yes.
I understand your point. that-
Very good.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'm sure the mayor and the staff will.
Would appreciate.
would-
You are welcome.
And we
Thank
would
you.
also appreciate if a resident would be treated respectfully.
Was that on the phone or was that in
That was
person?
in person.
And was it in the north lobby or in the main lobby?
Right on the other side of this building.
Okay, we'll reprimand that employee tomorrow.
Or,
You won't have to, I did.
thank you, I appreciate it.
You go.
Dennis, whether, I'm sorry, can't get the, Whether Holster,
Weatherholt.
okay. Anybody here?
Yeah, me. I just signed in. I don't need to.
Oh, no,
speak.
Dennis, you have to come up.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. I just couldn't understand your handwriting. It's much better than mine, but it's not
Okay.
gonna.
Dennis Weatherholt, 10 Madison Lane. The only reason I signed in is to let everybody know I was here, actually. But what I did want to do before I left was thank Linda Snyder for all her years of service to the township. I know tonight's her last meeting, so I just wanted to make sure to be here for that.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
And a fellow named Mario Spagnoletti, I think is how you pronounce it?
It's the first time I've ever seen him here.
First of all, I'd like to wish everyone a Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. You've done wonderful. Make sure you tell them you got in the barn. Oh,
Yeah.
and you all did a real nice job for the whole past year. And I want to wish Commissioner Armstrong a lot of luck on the Lehigh County new job he's going to have. So, now my only complaint is to Frank Clark. They're in the barn today for the first time, and those people from Lancaster did one heck of a job on redoing that barn. Now, this is the second time that barn was almost demolished. Nobody was killed, I guess. But, Frank, can't we get a guardrail alongside it? Is there, what's the stipulation on that?
Mario, we cannot put a guide rail outside. However, what saved the barn is what we're going to do inside, recreate inside the barn. Someone stacked tires inside the barn on the third main support beam. When the truck came through the barn, it hit those tires, which prevented him from taking out the third beam. If he had taken out the third beam, the whole barn would have collapsed on top of him. So the idea is we are going to take our tires and line the west wall inside with the tires as a buffer to, if anyone attempts to drive through again. If we put, and Frank can continue, what the legal ramifications of putting a guide rail up are with PennDOT.
Well, can't,
The lawyers have a field day with they can't even call them guardrails anymore, you have to call them guide rails. There's a legal distinction for that. So anytime you put up an impediment, or if somebody hits that, they could wind up being injured because they hit something that you purposely put in there to protect that structure.
well, my guardrails are all, like even down in a little gully, they put a guardrail there. I mean, if there's nothing there, so you get killed.
Well, again,
I'm not arguing with you.
no, I understand what you're saying.
Get
I
involved
want to
with
protect
that.
the structure as much as the next guy, all right? But, you know, you get into all these different battles. If somebody gets injured, even though they go through the barn and hit two beams, they got hurt, okay? If we went and put a guide rail out in front and they hit that first, all right, somebody somewhere would say, aha, we can sue the township because they put a guide rail there and I hit that and that's how I got hurt. Not that if they were 3 times the legal limit or something like that, that had nothing to do with it. But the fact that we have a guide rail there and we put it there specifically to protect the barn, somebody could potentially go after us for that. And that's why PennDOT took the lead and they took out guide rails all over the place. Do I agree with it? Absolutely not. But
Well,
that's the thing
right.
we're faced with right now.
So, well, we'll just hope it doesn't happen again, because that, I mean, I don't know how he didn't get killed, that
No,
fellow in
either.
the truck,
No, either.
because he just took out the whole one side of the barn.
So I like the way they work in Colorado. There's all these mountain
And it was
roads.
curbside.
No, what they do is they put boulders out there the size of this desk along the side of the road. And if one's missing, they go look for somebody. That's how they do it.
Well, thank you.
That's all. Is there anybody else that would like courtesy of the floor?
Okay, bill number 36-2017, title, an ordinance of the Township of Whitehall in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, adopting the 2018 annual budget and appropriating specific sums estimated to be required for the specific purposes of the township government, hereinafter set forth during the 2018 fiscal year. Do I have a motion?
I'll move.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any questions from the board? Any questions from the floor? Mr. Secretary, will you please poll the board?
Commissioner Dutt,
Yes.
Commissioner Ginder,
Yes.
Commissioner Snyder,
Yes.
Commissioner Sloniker, aye. Commissioner Howard,
Yes.
Commissioner Marks,
Yes.
and President Armstrong.
Aye.
Bill passes 7 ayes, 0 nays.
Bill number 37-2017, title, an ordinance of the Township of Whitehall in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, fixing the real estate tax rate for the year 2018. Do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
We're going to give it to Linda.
We'll give it to her.
Okay, we're going to go with
If she just talked, we'll get it to her.
Okay, all right, okay. Any questions from the board? Any questions from the floor?
Tell us what the rate is?
Would you please come up to the...
Okay, I got my answer.
The rate is the same as last year now,
That's it.
2.80.
Any other questions from the floor? Mr. Secretary, will you please poll the board?
Commissioner Snyder,
Yes.
Commissioner Marks,
Yes.
Commissioner Ginder,
Yes.
Commissioner Howard,
Yes.
Commissioner Dutt,
Yes.
Commissioner Sloniker, aye, and President Armstrong.
Aye.
Bill passes 7 ayes, 0 nays.
Bill number 38-2017, an ordinance of the Township of Whitehall in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, establishing a fee schedule for the collection of municipal solid waste by the Township of Whitehall. Do I have a motion?
I'll move.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any questions from the board? Any questions from the floor? Mr. Secretary, will you please poll the board?
Commissioner Swaniger, aye. Commissioner Dutt,
Yes.
Commissioner Marks,
Yes.
Commissioner Howard,
Yes.
Commissioner Ginder,
Yes.
Commissioner Snyder,
Yes.
President Armstrong.
Aye.
Bill passes 7 ayes, 0 nays.
Bill number 392017, an ordinance authorizing the acceptance of a proposal for purchase of LED streetlights and smart management system per request for proposal 17-27 in accordance with select section 3.20 in the Home Rule Charter, which requires authorization of acquisitions in excess of $25,000 by ordinance. Do I have a motion?
I'll move.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any questions from the board? Any questions from the floor? Mr. Secretary, will you please poll the board?
Commissioner Ginder,
Yes.
Commissioner Howard,
Yes.
Commissioner Dutt,
Yes.
Commissioner Marks,
Yes.
Commissioner Snyder,
Yes.
Commissioner Swaniger, aye, and President Armstrong.
Aye.
Bill passes 7 ayes, 0 nays.
Resolution number 2989, a resolution adopting the Township of Whitehall Capital Improvement Program 2018 to 2022, specifically for the 2018 fiscal year. Do I have a motion?
I'll move.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Do I have any questions from the board? Any questions from the floor? Mr. Secretary, will you please poll the board?
Commissioner Dutt,
Yes.
Commissioner Marks,
Yes.
Commissioner Howard,
Yes.
Commissioner Swaniger, aye, Commissioner Ginder,
Yes.
Commissioner Snyder,
Yes.
President Armstrong.
Aye.
Motion passes 7 ayes, 0 nays.
Resolution number 2990, a resolution of the Board of Commissioners of the Township of Whitehall reaffirming and reenacting the realty transfer tax, the earned income tax, the per capita tax, the local services tax, and the business privilege tax. Do I have a motion?
I'll move.
I have a second.
I'll second.
Any questions from the board? I kind of leaked out a special visitor was coming tonight. Everybody thought it was Santa Claus, but any questions from the floor? Mr. Secretary, will you please poll the board?
Commissioner Ginder,
Yes.
Commissioner Swaniger, aye, Commissioner Snyder,
Yes.
Commissioner Howard,
Yes.
Commissioner Dutt,
Yes.
Commissioner Marks,
Yes.
and President Armstrong.
Aye.
Resolution passes 7 ayes, 0 nays.
Resolution number 2991, a resolution declaring that bill number 36-2017, adopting the 2018 annual budget and appropriating specific sums estimated to be required for the specific purposes of the township government, is an emergency enactment and may take effect immediately. May I have a motion?
I'll move.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any questions from the board? Any questions from the floor? Mr. Secretary, will you please poll the board?
Commissioner Ginder,
Yes.
Commissioner Dutt,
Yes.
Commissioner Snyder,
Yes.
Commissioner Swaniger, aye, Commissioner Howard,
Yes.
Commissioner Marks,
Yes.
and President Armstrong.
Aye.
Resolution passes 7 ayes, 0 nays.
Resolution number 2992, title, a resolution declaring that bill number 37-2017, fixing the real estate tax rate for the year 2018, is an emergency enactment and may take effect immediately. Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Do I have any questions from the board? Any questions from the floor? Mr. Secretary, will you please poll the board?
Commissioner Marks?
Yes.
Commissioner Swaniger, aye. Commissioner Dutt?
Yes.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Commissioner Snyder?
Yes.
Commissioner Ginder?
Yes.
And President Armstrong.
Aye.
Resolution passes 7 ayes, 0 nays.
Resolution number 2993, a resolution declaring that bill number 38-2017, establishing a fee schedule for the collection of municipal solid waste, is an emergency enactment and may take effect immediately. Do I have a motion?
I'll move.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Do I have any questions from the board? Do I have any questions from the floor? Mr. Secretary, will you please poll the board?
Commissioner Swaniger, aye. Commissioner Ginder?
Aye. Yes.
Yes.
Oh, he's coming to our side now.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Commissioner Dutt?
Yes.
Commissioner Marks?
Yes.
And Commissioner Snyder?
Yes.
And President Armstrong.
And Mr. Armstrong will definitely abide by what it says on the paper. Aye.
Okay. Motion passes 7 ayes, 0 nays.
Resolution number 2994, a resolution revising resolution number 29.